Why do we fear failure? And what can we do about it? I suppose one way to look at it is simply that at the end of the day, we all want approval, validation, we all want love and respect from other people, especially those in our social circle, like close friends and family. And therefore that failure is equated to mean that we risk losing those things. สวัสดีครับ I'm Point from ค้นพบ and today let's dig into this topic a little bit more. So for me, the fear of failure has been something that I've been struggling with for a very long time, and it still bugs me and torments me very much to this day. I suppose failure is a universal fear, and it affects a lot of us, if not all of us. It's just a question of how much we have it, if we are aware of it or not, and how we manage and deal with it. So I think that human beings, in the way that we've been raised, we've been socially conditioned to want to fit in. We've been socially conditioned to not want to stand out, because standing out may mean that we have to face judgment, we have to face criticism, we risk being made fun of, we risk being looked at as a fool, and we risk respect and understanding. And nobody wants that. So that could be one reason why we have a fear of failure. But the way I like to look at it is that I look at it from the perspective of the ego mind. So for the purpose of this clip, let's define the ego as the sense of self. So your self-image that has accumulated over time. It is everything that you identify with, from the most obvious, like your name, your age, your gender, your race, your nationality, your family background, your family members, your social background, your career, your occupation, your successes and your shortcomings. And it also includes less obvious things like your taste and preferences, what food you like, what kind of music you like, your political views, your religious views, etc. All these things add up to the structure of your self-image, a sense of self, the ego. And the ego holds this self-image as an absolute truth, fixed, not flexible. You hold this as the truth, and the ego therefore must do everything in its power to protect this truth, to protect what it thinks is true, to protect this notion of the self-image, which, by the way, is much more relative than we even think, because the way you view yourself and the way you think about yourself is already completely different from the way that your dad thinks about you, from the way that your mom thinks about you, from the way that your family members think about you, from the way that your friends think about you, from the way that a stranger thinks about you. But for the ego, it is the absolute truth, and it must do everything it can to protect that. Therefore, any piece of information that pops up from something that somebody said, from something that you've discovered through readings or through hearing something or through seeing something, any piece of information that seems to go against the structure of your self-image is perceived by the ego as a threat, and it does not like that. So it must do everything it can in its power to protect it. The ego doesn't like to be under threat. So this leads to the next concept, that from the experiential perspective, any piece of information therefore gets interpreted by your ego mind. And that interpretation is what produces an experience, a positive or negative emotion. And this is really powerful to realize, because it means that we have internal control. And our internal control, the way we interpret outside events that happen to us, will lead to a quality of experience, whether a good one or a bad one. And think of it this way. So I'm here in Bangkok, and it's April right now. It's a very hot time of the year. And one of the worst fears for any Bangkokian is the power going out. And unfortunately, that still happens more often than you'd like. So imagine a situation where two people are at home and the power goes out, the air conditioning goes out. One person can be completely frustrated by it, can be completely angered by it, mad, angry, frustrated by the situation, feeling it's completely hot, he or she can't take it anymore, starts blaming the electrician, starts blaming the electrical grid, etc. Whereas the other person, yeah, he or she doesn't like the situation, but maybe they view it as, well, okay, it is what it is. I'll be hot and sweaty for a few hours, But eventually they'll fix it in a few hours, if not, but the latest by tomorrow, and I'll get my air conditioning back again. So we can see that two people in objectively the same situation essentially have polar opposite experiences. On the one hand, the first person has a very negative experience, interprets it as a bad emotion, as a bad thing that happens to them. On the other hand, the second person just takes it for what it is, isn't too much bothered by it. So this goes back to the point that our mind, the way it interprets things, has a big influence into how we feel emotionally, the quality of our experience. Which leads to the next point, that fear is a very powerful negative emotion because it leads to this chain reaction where the mind goes back again and back and back again to the emotion of fear that it has, and it goes back about it. It thinks about it more, it thinks about it more, and when you're not aware of this process, it makes it bigger and it makes you feel worse. So it is a self-perpetuating process in that regard. But if we are to define that your sense of quality of experience is a function of the way that your mind interprets a piece of information, then this leads to the next point, that can we be better able to deal with that? And the answer is yes. Because if we understand that we have internal control, then that means that we can look inwards and start to develop a tool, a mechanism to better manage these emotions and prevent ourselves from falling into the trap of fear, especially a fear of failure. How do we do that? For me, I think there are three main key tools. One is introspection, two is journaling, and three is meditation. So for me, at the end of the day, what I like to do is I like to sit by myself in a nice silent setting, have time for myself at the end of the day, and just introspect, reflect on how my day went. Especially if I had a bad day especially if I had a bad day, I like to think about how I felt in that moment and just look at it. And sometimes I will journal my thoughts, I'll write it down. And what we're really doing through introspection and journaling, whichever works better for you, is we're really ordering our thoughts. And we'll see that when we look at them again, we'll see that, okay, maybe I took things out of hand, maybe I took things out of context, maybe it isn't as bad as I thought. Right? It is your thought that goes unchecked, so to say, that exacerbates or makes something worse, or makes you feel worse. So we see that, okay, maybe I took things out of hand. Then you start to develop more awareness of your bad emotions. And this leads to meditation. Another powerful tool is, what I like to do, what I think is really powerful, is try to develop a meditation habit, 10 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, depending on the amount of time you have. You just sit there, eyes closed, and just try to observe your thoughts. You'll notice that thoughts just pop in and pop out quickly, and it's as if they come out of nowhere. So that means that we don't really have control of the thoughts that come into our mind. And when you just sit there and try to observe the thoughts, try to look at it for what it is. Try to not label it. Try to not have interpretation of it. Just see it for what it is. And of course, it will be very natural to get carried away by a train of thoughts, but the moment you realize that you're being carried away by a train of thoughts, try to bring yourself back to center. Because when you see a thought comes in, and your mind may go to autopilot mode and interpret that piece of information as a negative emotion, you start to feel bad. But when you look at it objectively, you just look at it, you start to realize that, all of a sudden it will disappear. It will dissolve. Why? Because you realize that it's only a function of the way which your mind looks at things, which gives it the essence of a positive or negative emotion. So once you start to develop this habit, you start to develop this tool to better identify things and look at them objectively, and you become more emotionally removed. And I think that goes back to helping us be better able to deal with fear, especially a fear of failure. Now, let me be very clear here. This is not easy to do because it takes consistency and it takes effort to do. It takes attention. You have to really try to develop this habit. And you want change overnight. This doesn't change overnight because your programming, the way you view things, has been a result of an accumulation of your thinking patterns. Your thought habits has happened throughout a long time, many years. So it's going to take time to undo what has been done already on an emotional level. And I struggled with this a lot myself too. I try to develop this habit as much as I can. And, I don't do it every day. I try to do it every day. And I think that's what matters. The consistency matters. And the patience matters. Because you have to realize that it takes time to develop this habit. And at first, you're going to be discouraged because you don't see instant results. But I think that if you have faith in the process, you'll start to see that you're better aware, you're better able to detect your negative thoughts and negative emotions much better, and you're able to see them more objectively. So I think that's really important. And also, one more key insight I think is when you look at it, when you have a negative emotion, think about what you would say if that was another friend. If a friend of yours had a bad day, what would you do to cheer them up, right? You probably wouldn't make them feel worse. You probably wouldn't, beat up on their scars. You probably try to cheer them up and say, hey, it's not that bad, you're alright, etc. So try to imagine that you're your own friend in that moment and cheer yourself up. I know, again, this is hard to do, but I think they're really powerful tools once you start to develop them. And you start to have a sense of enjoyment when you start to develop them because you see the value in it and you want to master them more. And that's a really fun thing in and of itself. So I just want to end the clip by saying that to truly fail is not to make a mistake. And we learn from our failures. And I have to keep reminding myself that too. Because that's what happens when I have a bad day, is I forget to remind myself of these things. But to truly fail means to refuse to get up again. You've truly failed when you refuse to get up again, even though your heart still desires to achieve that goal or dream. I think that's awesome to think about. Alright, that's it for now. Thank you very much. Please let me know what you think. Please let me know if you've had similar experiences or differing ones and how it worked for you. I also want to hear that. So please do share them in the comments below. Please press the like button, subscribe, and hit the bell button if you're on YouTube. And for now, I'll see you next time. Thank you very much. สวัสดีครับ